Good morning, Wabash. Speaking today in chapel is Dr. James Jeffries. Dr. Jeffries serves students as Assistant Director of Career Services and occasional philosophy instructor. He attended Lakota Elementary, Southmont High School, the University of Chicago, and the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign, where he successfully defended his doctoral dissertation on April the 4th, earning a PhD in philosophy, writing on creativity and its ethics. Outside of career services, he listens to metal, new age, and industrial techno, reads Cormac McCarthy and Dostoevsky. Yes, I'm sorry. My tongue's tied today, I'm sorry. Yeah, he plays a little guitar, puts carpentry skills to good use, and works on entrepreneurial side projects with his wife and friends. He lives a country life just outside of Crawfordsville with his wife, daughter, son, dog, cat, and 10 chickens. Giving his talk titled, Ordering Off the Menu, Thoughts on Selecting, Choosing, and Creating Your Life, Dr. James Jeffries. I'm sorry. I told you one more stuff today.
Thanks to Ian for warming you up for me. That was nice. Thank you all for coming out for this, my first chapel talk. I'm really delighted and honored to be here. I hope you feel the same way afterward. I thank you. I'd also like to thank the Sphinx Club. I want you to join me in thanking them for being the motor behind this important Wabash tradition. And I want to start out with a story. This is a true story with a little bit of embellishment. An art dealer bought a canvas signed Picasso and traveled all the way to Cannes to discover whether it was authentic. So we're back in time right now. Picasso was working in his studio. He cast a single look at the canvas and he said, "It's a fake." Of course, he didn't say that in English. A few months later, the dealer bought another canvas signed Picasso. Again, he traveled, and again, Picasso, after a single glance, grunted this time, "It's a fake." "But Mr. Picasso," cried the dealer, "it so happens that I saw you with my own eyes 2 years ago painting this very picture." So you can see it, right? This dealer in the godlike artist studio. He's standing there, there's some masterpiece half painted on a canvas stretched out in front of Picasso. There are dealers all over Europe scrambling for one picture, even a small sketch with that iconic scrawl, Picasso, down in the corner. Picasso looks at the dealer's looking back at him expectantly. Picasso shrugs and says this, "I often paint fakes." Because a good anecdote like this, it makes me laugh, and then the thinker in me wants to understand what's going on with it. Picasso could have explained to the art dealer that even once you've contributed so much to the art world, you're a great and master artist, even occasionally that person will paint something that's hackneyed, will do something that's a copycat work. He copies himself. That's a great point to make, and it's worthy of a strong undergraduate philosophy paper or art paper. But it's not the point that Picasso makes. It lacks the human force that he puts behind his answer. "I often paint fakes." Put this way, the overly glorified artist gets knocked down a little bit from this idealized pedestal back to earth, but I think without really undermining the genuine value of his achievement. The story's funny because we get so preoccupied with these two cliched ideas about artists. The unremarkable copycat in one corner, the godlike artist in the other corner, getting ready to battle it out. And we totally miss the third contender that sneaks in to knock them both out. It's kind of like an epic rap battle of history. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, after this talk, rush out and search YouTube for Bill Gates versus Steve Jobs. You'll know what I'm talking about, and you'll laugh hysterically. We delight in this sudden overturning of our ways of thinking about things, and we laugh. And the anecdote is immediately more effective than an intellectual screed about art because of its elegance and its concision, and the real-world artist, Pablo Picasso, standing there proving the point in his own life. Picasso in this joke orders off the menu. That's the main image I want you to take away from the talk today, the image of someone looking past the pages of options pre-designed for him, breaking out of what's familiar and well-established and ordering up something different. Not just selecting something at random or choosing, however insightfully, from the existing options, but someone bringing some new choice into being for the first time, delivering a missing third contender. Now, most of you know me from my work in career services, helping you make sense of the future and everything, a calling and how to get there, how to secure a fellowship, how to initiate an entrepreneurial venture, what are the nuts and bolts of a resume review. A number of you also know me from my philosophical work, trying to understand creativity and its ethics. This has been a preoccupation of mine, a fascination for well over 2 decades now, ever since I first recognized that our world is malleable and changeable. Even many of the most important things in our lives can change at the drop of a hat, and we need to understand how that happens and how we can contribute to it in meaningful, important, and valuable ways. Outstripping the norms of my professional identity, the ways that most of you know me. A few of you know me well enough to have heard some of my story, met the family that's so important to me, seen what makes me angry, inspired, curious, and what makes me laugh. I have the pleasure of speaking to you in all of these voices today because really that's just my voice. They're my voice as truthful as I can make it, because that is what you should demand in a venue like this at a place like Wabash, dedicated as we all are to thinking, acting, leading, and living lives informed by the values, knowledge, and wisdom of the liberal arts education, the education of free people. So some ground rules for this talk. First, you're going to have to grant me a little poetic license. I don't have time for a philosophical discourse, as much as I'd like to give that. Rule number 2, you're going to have to stretch your imagination a little bit. So think of the last thing you imagined in a serious way, double its shape, and color its sounds. What? I want you all in for this. Get your mind ready. We're going to start off with something a little bit easy. Imagine you head into a restaurant. You're really hungry. One thing you can do is just select something off the menu. You can respond to this craving you have, a preference that you have, burger and fries, salad, whatever. You could even pick up something at random, flipping through the pages, putting your finger down. It's kind of like calling a coin flip, heads or tails. It doesn't really matter. That's selecting. And if you tend to get the same thing over and over again, you tend to select the same thing, that's called a habit, continual selection of the same thing. Distinct from selecting, choosing is more informed by deeper thought, perception, attention to circumstances, context. So you might bring more of yourself to a choice than you do in a mere selection. You might have a value like the rejection of factory-farmed meat, or the pursuit of health. You order based on these things when you make a choice. Or you might bring an economic understanding to the choice that you make, where you understand that where you choose to eat, for example, could make the difference between one place staying open and another place shutting its doors. Or understanding that the selection of food on the menu that you make reinforces the decision the restaurant had or made to put the choice on the menu in the first place. But what happens if you're a vegetarian, given the options of steak or fish? Despite popular consensus in Crawfordsville, fish is not a vegetarian option. What happens if your hunger is just not satisfied by the options that are laid out in front of you? That's when you have to order off the menu. And if you'll indulge me a little bit, that's when you must enter a world of much greater risk, reward, and work by bringing something new into being. To order off the menu, in this sense, is to create something new. Typically, ordering off the menu comes at the end of the line, when all the familiar lines of thought and satisfaction reach their ends or come into conflict, when you cannot make a choice. Godlike artists or hackneyed copycat No. Steak or fish? No. With your liberal education, so long as you continue to cultivate it and experience this world, you can't help but reach the end of the line sometimes and see that however rich and valuable the options available to you, you must speak an utterly nonsensical no. Republican or Democrat? No. Banker or consultant? No. Bottle or can? Teacher or doer? Pacifist or patriot? Fraternity or independent? Live to work or work to live? No. What is the thing that you say no to in your life? What is that choice that you cannot make? What are you hungry for that's not on the menu? Nothing is perfectly simple about any of these options available to you, but the more you learn, the more simply selecting from the choices that are laid out for you becomes unconscionable. And in some cases, even an informed choice with conviction becomes impossible. This is where you must order off the menu. Bring a new idea into being, innovate, invent, and proceed without the steady hand of the past with its familiar practices, traditions, and ideas, because it's precisely these things that sometimes come up short, whether in the social world, the world of commerce, politics, religion, the arts, or the singular life that you must lead. So I'm going to make a couple points about this. First, it's sometimes said that answers are easy once you ask the right questions. You've heard this. Answers are easy once you ask the right question. But I caution you to beware of easy answers when you haven't asked a tough enough question. If answers come that easily, you're probably following and not setting a precedent, ordering from and not off the menu, selecting convention and not creating it. When it comes to building a life and a life's work for yourself, one that's really your own and not just selected from a menu, know that it will take effort, practice, and education of all kinds to move past what you and others find familiar, move past what we have as a collective comfort zone, something that can be daunting and exhilarating at the same time. Your liberal education is a giant leap in this direction, toward the fringes of what we as a species have managed to make sense of, toward our biggest questions and the contradictions of our biggest answers. By now you know this education actually opens up even more questions than it answers, and frankly, that's one of the big things that's really hard to explain to people outside of this tradition. We're not here just to get answers. We're here to learn how to ask questions, how to tackle them, how to dive right in. You don't have to answer all of these questions in 4 years while you're here, but take them seriously, practice hard at answering them, and get ready to deliver that skillful thinking, analyzing, communicating out in the world, where there are plenty of solvable problems, waiting for someone with the ability to address them, waiting for you. To me, this is the hard intellectual path that bears its greatest fruits in the realization that there are legitimate problems, real limitations in the way we think and do things, sometimes running so deep that convention barely shows a symptom. But also that you really can change things for the better, revising and improving our world, resolving conflict and social conflict, advancing thought, things, and values through your intellectual, social, artistic, and commercial achievements. That's what you get from this education. It follows that ordering off the menu often has no good basis if it isn't rooted in a firm understanding of what the options are. Saying no to something out of habit because it's unfamiliar, or you haven't worked really hard to understand a subject or practiced to master a discipline. In each of these cases, ordering off the menu just ignores the legitimate value, expertise, and thought that might have gone into what came before you. The chef can put an awful lot of thought into laying out those menus. Our history is full of wonders to explore, prearranged for you, and you should indulge in them. There's not enough time to learn everything about everything, but in the things that matter most to you and to those you care about, you can't be dismissive of what came before you just because it came before you. Kekule, the organic chemist For example, innovated in organic chemistry not by ignoring what came before him, but by breaking through the norm of representing organic molecules in chains. Picasso mastered realism before breaking through to analytical cubism. Henry Ford understood his customers better than they understood themselves by delivering a vehicle that everyone could afford. I've heard here at Wabash, for example, that we can't just rely on our traditions to carry us into the future. We can't do things the same way just because that's how we've always done them, and as far as I can tell, that's perfectly true. But neither can you assume that a tradition is misguided simply because it's a tradition. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. But do the work to understand why something works when it does, to be prepared to address something that doesn't work anymore. Though I just praised the liberal arts a moment ago, let me emphasize to you that you have not overcome ignorance. You haven't met the fringes of your familiarity. You haven't gone into your comfort zone entirely just for being at college for 4 years. You're learning to ask and answer questions, how to listen and speak, how to learn. But to plug for my office on campus, you'll still be ignorant of how to use your skill and practice and ignorant of where you can make your greatest contribution until you get some experience. Whether it's business, law, medicine, politics, science, or art, you overcome ignorance only by getting out there and experimenting and engaging and learning and reflecting. To take a different analogy, a kid slamming random keys on the piano does not sound like improvisation and really should listen to his piano teacher. Ordering off the menu isn't just throwing random things together, it requires the deepest kind of engagement. Point number 3, even at the point where you have overcome ignorance, and mind you that ignorance here is an interesting kind of thing where you've come to the end of what we know, and you know that we don't know something. When you've reached that point, things can still go wrong. So now think back again to the restaurant. Imagine this time you go with a first-rate whiner, someone who complains about everything they have on the menu, who can't make up his mind. I'm sure you've been around these people. And in the real world, they're whining from everything from politics to religion to the food at Sparks. All of us are whiners from time to time, but some of us do make it a habit. No matter how much you dress up a whiner into an esteemed critic with scrupulous taste, a clever satirist, a prophet, a dystopian writer, the whiner remains at the level of a naysayer, always saying no without creating any alternative. Ordering off the menu requires more than just saying no to what's around you. You also have to put together a new option. This is the real heart of ordering off the menu, creating something, not just that you reject something, but that you have something to say, something to do, some actions to take that might be more acceptable. This is a pretty rigorous requirement. You can't just go to the restaurant server, for example, and say, "I don't like anything that you have. Please make me something good." You've just given up all your chance of bringing something new into this world, of ordering something specific off the menu. And idealists, I think, often make this mistake when, after some elaborate, fascinating, beautiful criticism of the status quo, they say something like, "Let's just all get along." Or futurists will say, "Human ingenuity will solve this problem eventually." Well, who will make this change? How will they make it? Those aren't questions or answered as a matter of course. Someone has to order these things off the menu. But fourth, of course, what you order may be impossible. There's a risk involved in trying something new. It could be that not all the ingredients are available for what you order. The world may not be ready for your creation. It may not work. That's run risk. There's also the case that what you create is bad for you, and it could be bad for others. That's another risk. And I hold the fairly contrarian position in philosophy that not all creativity is a good thing. Minimally, an awful lot of what we create is ambiguous at first. and this is by direct implication from the fact that it's new and untested. Probably my favorite anecdote, an example of this comes from, it's very old, comes from Plato's Phaedrus. Plato's Socrates tells a myth about writing, and here I want you to stretch your imagination a little bit more. Here's the setting. The old god, Thuth, walks into the court of the Egyptian king Thamos. He's holding court and inviting people there to show off the things that they've created, their inventions, their innovations. And you can imagine Thuth walking in with a magic bag. He is a god after all, and starting to pull out these incredible things. Thamos is there to look at the things, assess them, and if they're any good, he's going to spread them out to all of the Egyptian people. That's a big win. All right, so the first things that he pulls out, Thuth the god, he pulls out number and calculation. That's a pretty big deal, right? Then he pulls out geometry and astronomy, equally important. He also pulls out checkers and dice, which are pretty cool. The good king, Thamos, he looks at all this stuff and he says, yeah, that's excellent. I will get that out to my people immediately. What else do you have in that bag? And Thuth says, this is the best thing of all. This is my greatest innovation. He pulls it out. I have no idea what it looks like, but he pulls out writing. The innovation of writing. And he says, this is the best thing I've ever made. It will make your people wise. It's a remedy for memory. It will turn your people in new directions. They'll be enabled for the future in brilliant new ways. And the good king looks at it and he says, basically, that's ridiculous. That's stupid. He levies what I think is one of the most powerful criticisms I've ever seen of something that's incredibly valuable and important and ingrained in our lives today. He says, look, Thuth, what you've made here is totally misguided. And because you're the father of this thing, because you're its creator, you don't understand what its limitations are. In fact, because it's your child, you've taken to describing it in exactly the opposite. It's what its value is. You said it's a remedy for memory. In fact, it makes everyone write down their thoughts and leave them there and not hold them inside in their own memories. You said it's a remedy for wisdom, but in fact, everyone's going to be able to read these words and, as we put it, regurgitate them without ever knowing anything. And in his own words, this is the most important piece. The people who do this, the people who start writing things down, they'll be difficult to get along with, since they will merely appear to be wise instead of really being so. So what's he just told us? What has Plato just told us? Writing is terrible. It's a ruthless criticism. It's bad for memory, bad for wisdom, bad for people. And take a step back. It just goes to show that no matter what you do in this life, someone's going to be around to criticize it. So buck up, get a thick skin, and remember that even the inventor of writing apparently has some wounds to lick after such a brutal bashing. And then ask yourself, is this criticism about writing wrong? Imagine that moment in the transition from an oral tradition to the written word. Imagine the Iliad, first written down and read aloud, kind of like I'm reading this speech, instead of delivered from the astonishing memory of a rhapsode. Think about all those facts that you can state because you've read them somewhere. Do you really understand all of the things you claim to know? On balance, new things and the new ways of life that support them take courage combined with a lack of the kind of foresight we wish we had. Could the founders of Twitter really have envisioned their tool playing an important role in the Arab Spring? Could Zuckerberg have foreseen the emergence of strange new phenomena like self-bullying and new forms of addiction on his platform? Can you always tell whether a work of art or a film, a work of fiction, is degrading or honest or valuable? Should Henry Ford have done anything differently if he'd known the assembly line would radically transform the satisfactions that it's possible for people to get from their work? I don't think these questions are very easily answered, and that's one reason why the ethics of creativity is so important. What you can remember, though, is that at precisely this point where you take up something new, where you order off the menu, the charge to act responsibly and live humanely finds its greatest focus. Those who do not ask critical and ethical questions at these points can make things both profitable and harmful. So I'd like to turn now to a little bit of almost practical advice based on this. You've probably heard people say before that when you're going into the job world or you're going to graduate school or you're applying for a fellowship, what you really need to do is sell yourself. You may not know this because you don't have the context, but in the career services profession, it's everywhere. People telling you to sell yourself, to brand yourself, to make yourself a product, to put yourself on the market. I think that's pretty misguided. You probably nodded a little bit earlier when I said liberal arts is the education of free people. Do you then want to turn around and sell yourself? Of course, we know what they're saying. Sell yourself. That means put together your best qualities into a package. Be sure to present them in the best light. Make yourself known for something. And that's important, but there's a better way to put it. I don't say sell yourself. I say make your argument. Make your argument. That's something you've been preparing for a long time. On all those papers you've written for class, at least the good ones, you started with a thesis, you added some good reasons, and you offered evidence for what supports those reasons. When writing a resume, the advice I give, make your argument. Understand your audience and what they're asking for. Find the things you can make an honest claim to have, the attributes, virtues, skills, experience. Put those on there, and then provide all the evidence ruthlessly, precisely, without all the fluff that gets you that job, that gets you into that graduate school, that gets you a fellowship. There's a very nice complementary idea that goes along with making your argument. It goes like this: make your evidence. This is a little less familiar. Make your evidence. You're probably familiar with research, going out and finding things out in the world that serve as evidence in these papers, doing a literature review, asking some questions and answering them. It's good evidence. The incredible thing about being a person, leading your own life, is that you won't find evidence out in the world. You have to make it yourself. All the stuff that goes onto your resume is stuff that you've done. That's the evidence that you've made. You won't go out into the world and find it. Make your evidence. This really comes in two ways. When you're looking for an internship, for example, you're asking to get an experience that will move you forward in your life. That's one way of going about it. There's another way. It's ordering off the menu. This is the guy who comes in and says, I've got to work this whole summer. I've got to go home and work on the farm. And I say, well, how can you transform that? How can you make it more than just working on the farm? What projects can you envision to move yourself forward? I'm asking him to order off the menu, to make his evidence in a different way. So we have some recent Fulbrighters, Sebastian Guerin and Patrick Stroud. We have our Idea Spark entrepreneurial contest winners, Chet Turnbow and Jacob Alter. We have Stephen Batchelder, the student leader of Wabash Callings. Each of these guys are exemplary, and not to the exclusion of so many other fantastic guys I know. They get it. They get that you can't wait around to figure everything out before you start taking action. In fact, when they're faced with that dichotomy, think or act, they say no. They say they're going to act through thinking, they're going to think through acting, they're going to go and pursue their own quest, they're going to go and make a commercial venture that solves a problem, they're going to dig into their studies and produce something that's original research. It's fantastic. So let me be clear, when you come into career services, and ask, what's out there for me? There's not a problem with that question, and there's a rich world of opportunity for you. But there's another question you can ask. You can ask, where are the gaps out there that I might be able to fill? Where can I leave my mark and make my evidence? What can I order off of the menu? So I want to weave this all together now, in conclusion, with a single thread. Most of you have probably buried in your memory somewhere the story of Peter and the magic thread, even if you don't remember it called that. Peter's this strong, capable boy, too impatient for a future, and he eagerly accepts a silver ball with a single golden thread dangling from it. He accepts it from an old crone, as these stories go. He takes it, and he's constantly greedy for a future free of hardship. So when he pulls that string, he's sitting in class one day, he pulls the string and he finds that the class period is over. All that work, all that boredom is finished. He doesn't have to live through it. He gets to the end of the day and he's pretty clever, so he thinks, school's pretty boring, I'd rather be at the end of it. He gives that string a big tug. He goes clear to the end of school, he's graduating. And he thinks, that was great. And pretty soon, he's wanting to get married, he has a job, and he thinks, I'm ready to move up to that next step. I'm going to skip all this boring stuff. I'm going to skip the challenge. I'm going to pull that string again. And suddenly he's married. He has a couple of kids. He's working every day. And not too much later, he goes to work and he remembers, or he finds that, hey, this is awful. I don't want to be working, spending all my time doing this. So he pulls the thread again, and he's all the way at retirement, and he's luxuriating on the beach in Florida, as so many people do. And then it hits him. Man, where has my life been? What have I done? What have I missed out on? We know that lesson. The story in this lesson to embrace labor required for fruit, to face the future through the present, to own up to it and take ownership of it, because that is the very stuff of life. That's Peter and the golden thread. I want to tell you another story. This one is about you, it's about me, it's about all of us in this room. And it's a story full of statements like, if only I'd done this, and what could have been. Imagine you two take possession of Peter's silver ball. With the golden thread dangling out one end, you pull on the thread and find it stuck. Your great hope of ending this chapel talk early is shot. Your dream of moving straight to graduation in a month, or 1 or 2 or 3 years, it's upended by a faulty bit of magic. But you persist, and because you're more observant and more clever than even Peter is, you find a button at the bottom of the ball. You push it, and you see me standing here, delivering an anecdote, poorly, about Pablo Picasso. You push it again, and suddenly you're still in bed this morning, comfortable, with the day spread out before you. And because you're more imaginative and more ambitious than Peter, you push that button a lot more, because you think, if only I'd studied more for that exam. If only I'd known my friend needed me at that time. If only I'd moved in for that kiss. If only I'd gone to career services earlier. Things might have been different if only I'd done things differently in the past. And here's the question: how far back can you move your life? How much can you push that button? How many hours of TV watching, idle chit-chat, and moments where you know you did not meet your full potential, express your highest integrity, fully appreciate beauty, or love others in the way they deserved? How many of these moments could you take back with the push of a button? But there are problems with pushing the button, because the world that depends on you, on your life, on your presence, is pulled back with it. You matter. With each push of the button, you put something at risk. You make uncertain the things of genuine value you've contributed, all those relationships you've built over time, all those things you've made, all those things you've created and shared with others. I'm granting that you take your memories back with you, you take your ideas with you, so you certainly can't lose everything with the push of a button. But how many of your best moments really depend on the specifics of the situation and who you shared them with? How many of your best ideas depend on the people and the place around you to be set to work? Perhaps you could tumble back through time and invest in Google. That'd be great, right? But could you make Google? Now, we can only live in one direction, into the future, but we can resolve to order our lives to the greatest of our abilities in ways that we would not want to take back. And here I think is one piece of that resolution, one piece of what that resolution would look like. To recognize that ordinary, everyday selections are the first things to go, those impulses, those acting on preferences, those habits. Those are the things we'd be fine forgetting and taking back with the push of a button, erasing. Choices are more robust, of course, and you may want to erase a few bad choices. But many of our choices are just written into the menu. That's the whole point. Go back in your time before Wabash, and it'll still be here waiting for you to choose it again. In the order of life, I contend our relationships and our creations are the things that we would be least willing to put into jeopardy. Those moments of real connection, sharing and living that could hardly be reproduced. And those things we make that surge beyond convention and bring something new into being. Those two pieces are vital because they represent our contributions to this world that won't be factored out with the click of a button. So I commend them to you. Suggest you go make your order. Thank you.
All right, just a few announcements before we leave. TGIF will be held on Friday in the volleyball court behind Sigma Chi. We'll be hosting some volleyball games back there, and then we can venture over to watch the baseball team play at home. Also this weekend, on Saturday, lacrosse will play at Wheaton, Ohio. Baseball will have a doubleheader against Denison, and track will be at Purdue. Please rise and sing Old Wabash.
Rotate.